Freedom Council is nothing without all of you. How do we go about getting people held criminally responsible for their acts? The military is still at risk. Election interference, the medicalization of childhood. These drug dealers like Pfizer and Moderna, we can seize their property. We develop our litigation through conferences like this. It's going to come through communications. It's going to come through conversations. And Freedom Council is that conversation.
For information, visit freedomcouncil.org.
I knew as early as February 2020 that I needed to do something.
I recognized that there was a systematic problem and that this was not about hydroxychloroquine, it was something larger.
Fear shut the world down, and people made a lot of money at it as they were killing us.
I was asked to speak at a freedom rally that was set up to discredit my reputation.
Whoever orchestrated this must not have the safety of this nation in mind.
Medicine and politics should be separated. These doctors were handcuffed.
The American public has awakened. We have a new civil rights movement to restore our rights, and we're going to hold them accountable.
It is a natural progression of a man of God or woman of character to see injustice, to seek it out, and then to act upon it.
Do you hear me? We will never lock down again. This is the hill we die on.
Don't miss New American Heroes with attorney Warner Mendenhall and John Davidson, Mondays on BrokenTruth.tv.
With Broken Truth and almost a broken button on my mic, I'm John Davidson, and today we have Warner Mendenhall as my co-host and the lovely Lucia Sinatra from No College Mandates with us. Welcome, Lucia.
Hi, John. Hi, Warner. Good to see you both.
So we met originally when I took your database of great colleges that were not doing a great thing, but they were mandating the COVID vaccine on their students. And you had this huge database, and I mapped it out, and that's how we kind of connected. And then we made friends at all the events. But Warner, how did you guys meet?
You know, Lucia, I'm not really sure exactly. Do you remember how?
I do. So I remember, Warner, do you remember early on? So Warner and I we've probably been friends since nearly the beginning. We used to do these spaces called Clubhouse. Do you remember that, Warner?
Yes.
So I think it was Lisa Leahy or maybe the people at VSRF that said, do you guys know each other? We might have even done an early show with Steve Kirsch's organization. He had us on really early in the beginning of VSRF and his whole podcast series. And I think we met through that group, started these clubhouses, Twitter spaces back when X was Twitter. And yeah, the rest is history. Here we are, how many years later? That was early 2021.
And we're still in the fight, unfortunately.
And we're still in the fight.
We'll get into, but I mean, it was horrific. I remember that summer, 2021, and it was becoming clear what was going to happen at these colleges. And, and my kids, or my son at that time was college aged as well. So, I was dealing with it personally, and I'm dealing with, these other parents that are coming in with their kids, talking about the mandates. I was astounded by it. And I couldn't believe that I had to, and I had to work with, Kent State, I'll name the school, to get an exemption for my son. And then luckily, I think partly because there was a lot of activity, Akron University here right down the street from me never imposed a mandate.
Yep.
So I hope that we had some influence on that. I think maybe we did, but the other thing I do remember from that is Turning Point came into town as well. And I went over and met with Turning Point and the students at Akron University. So there was a very rapid response, I guess, just down the street from me to these proposed mandates.
Nice. I'm certain you made the difference because there really was people ask me all the time, what's the pattern of colleges that mandated versus those that didn't? And there is no pattern. The pattern is outrage, pushback, public pressure. That's the difference between colleges that mandated and didn't mandate, really. It's not tied to federal funding, not tied to state funding. Those do not correlate 100% of the time. So, it's anybody's guess. And I do think public pressure was the biggest thing in our favor. Early public pressure, like, look, you don't wait and see. You don't have to mandate these things right now. Wait and see. And then the ones, of course, that didn't mandate almost really never went on to mandate. And that looks like over 500 colleges that just never mandated. And funny enough, we can get into this, but every single one of those colleges fared better with the virus on campus than the colleges that mandated COVID-19 vaccines.
Well, before we jump into it, let's go back in time a little bit. And can you sort of describe your history and what prompted you to put this organization together?
Yeah. So like Warner, I'm sitting around, December 2020. My oldest son just got into his dream college, early decision. He just got into Dartmouth. And I'm sitting around thinking, oh my God, these colleges are going to mandate COVID-19 vaccines. And I'm waiting and I'm thinking, and I'm like, it's coming. I know it's coming. And I'm starting to prepare mentally for this fight at that point, because I'm thinking to myself, I've got a kid who was canceled out of everything his senior year of high school. So couldn't go to prom, didn't have a graduation, was canceled from going to most of his friends' graduation parties because they required that he show his COVID vaccine card. And so, it's end of the year and then beginning of the next year. And he's getting really angry with me. He's like, Mom, you're ruining my life. This is everything to a high school graduate, is you want to go to all the festivities and the parties. And I said, look, so that you don't accuse me of ruining your life, I'm going to let you figure this out for yourself. And whatever you decide, I will try my best to support. And my son, and he's graduating June of 2021. And, the festivities are starting around Christmas time. And, and so into the spring, I give him a couple of studies on both sides. I give him the Great Barrington Declaration. I give him some studies out of Yale. And I tell him he's a really smart kid. So I tell him, go in your room and you decide. And that way, by the time graduation comes, if you decide you want to get these vaccines, let's have a conversation about it. And he went and locked himself in his room for like 3 or 4 hours, came out, threw the studies on the kitchen table. And he said, Mom, I will never get these vaccines. I don't care what I'm canceled from. I will never get these vaccines. So I saw hope when Jack came to me and he said that. I saw hope. I can access younger people. I can also convince them that they're not seeing all the data. They're not seeing all the science. They're not being told the truth. I can certainly talk to the parents. I can reach out to the colleges. And that's really how my mission was born. I've always been an advocate here in California in the public school system. My second son is a differentiated learner. So I've been fighting the public school systems for at least a decade, trying to get kids who need services in the public school sector to get the services that they deserve, that they're entitled to under federal law, under state law. So being an advocate wasn't new to me, but being an advocate for medical freedom was. So I thought, should I just ignore this, go to bed, pretend it's keep quiet, hide under the rug, just keep my kids safe and just let this thing play out? Because if I take this on, it's going to be a big deal. I'm going to have friends, family, I'm going to get in all sorts of fights. And I tried to forget about it. Literally a week's time, I'm sitting here and I'm getting these callings and, I'm getting all these signs and I'm thinking, ignore it. Just take care of your kids, keep your head down, do what's best for your family. And all of a sudden I don't know, after this internal battle, maybe for a couple of days or so, I was like, oh, hell no. I cannot sit silent. I cannot watch this happen. I cannot. And that started as soon as the first college mandated exactly what I thought would happen, my worst nightmare. In April 2021, Rutgers announced the first college COVID-19 vaccine mandates. Within a few days after, maybe a week after, Harvard announced. And then as if Harvard, as if the entire world looks to Harvard for guidance, within a week or two, or maybe a month or two, we had over 1,000 colleges that announced COVID-19 vaccine mandates for fall enrollment. And that was it. As soon as that dam broke, something inside me rose up. I could not sit silent in the face of such blatant injustice against these young, healthy adults, two of whom I live with and I love dearly. And all I could think about was all of these other young, vulnerable, impressionable, easy to manipulate college students were going to be sold a bag of goods and basically told they needed to take these vaccines to keep their community safe, which we all knew before even the first college mandate was, sort of came to pass, which was fall 2021 enrollment. We knew by summer 2021 that those vaccines did not prevent infection or transmission. And so that was it. It just got worse. The snowball started out rolling down the hill and just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I got more angry, more fired up. And that's how we started.
Well, it's very interesting. And I was always astounded that it was the elite schools that implemented these mandates. I thought, these are supposed to be smart people that are making these decisions. And in fact, Lucia, you can talk about this a little bit. The elite schools were the last to give it up. I mean, Oberlin College here in Ohio, private elite school, very liberal, and it was one of the last one. I don't even know where it is right now. Actually, I think the last time I looked, they were still mandating some things.
Yeah.
And I, there are a few of those. Can you give us an update on that? How many are still mandating?
So it's a good question. So I always separate students into what I call general population students and then healthcare students. So general population students covers every major that is not a health science major. So for general population students, the only school system still mandating the COVID-19 vaccine is the University of California system, which is several hundreds of thousands of kids. However, they allow everyone to input and opt out. So in other words, they mandate it. They won't take away the mandate, but they freely accept the paperwork to opt out. The problem with that is you still have several thousand, hundreds of students that are thinking they're mandated to take these vaccines because the websites are confusing. I think intentionally so. Confusing to say, look, here's the list of vaccines you need to get. And by the way, if you click through 8 pages, you can find that there's an opt-out for the COVID-19 vaccine. And then there's now religious exemptions available, personal belief exemptions for almost every single one of the other vaccines. But to get to that opt-out or to get to the page that entitles you to an exemption, or at least file for an exemption, on some of the UC websites is like so convoluted that I still get phone calls from families and parents saying, my kid just got an email accepted to the UC system saying, here are your mandated vaccines, zero mention of the opt-out. So I've been after the University of California for some time. They ignore me now. They know exactly who I am. They know exactly the work that we do. But other than telling me to go away and take their schools off my lists, they rarely respond to me. Quite frankly, you and I have talked about this, Warner. We can get into it later, but I need a plaintiff. I need a lawsuit. I need to go after the University of California to get them to change this language.
Yeah, I think we need to make a short clip of this because, like you said, there's 250,000 employees, there's hundreds of thousands of students, and people just don't know. We've got to get the word out that there's a way around the university's horrific system.
Yep.
And they're using that theory. What's it called? Nudge theory. I forget the supposed academic who came up with nudge theory.
Yeah.
They make the pathway easier for you to go along with the program.
That's right.
And then you have to learn how to fight to not do it. I'm going to look up his name right now because I want to call him out, actually.
Yeah, great idea.
But, you know, people in the University of California system really need to understand they can get around this.
Yes.
You don't have to get the shot, you know, forget about it. And the research now that we have about how dangerous this is, I hope has penetrated people's consciousness. You know, there's potential DNA integration. There's horrific, you know, physical effects from the shot, long-term effects for many, many people.
Yeah.
And kids, as we know and knew from the very, very early on, are not susceptible to COVID, period. And in the other vaccines, I think everything's into question now. So please, you know, I would urge any parent or student to figure that out.
Absolutely.
And pay attention to what we're learning.
You know,
Warner,
employees too, by the way.
We would be hard pressed to find a major COVID outbreak on any U.S. campus. We would be hard pressed to find a college student who got severely ill from COVID, and then forget about finding a college student who died from COVID. If you really get into the comorbidities and the background health of this student, and how they were labeled, did they die of COVID, with COVID? I mean, it's really mind blowing, and I do think the academics and the students on almost every college campus, I really, with the outreach that I get, but it's all kept confidential because they are still lurking in the shadows. They are still afraid to come out publicly about this. Everyone's response today is, what the hell was that for? What did they do? What have we done? Why did we comply? Oh my God, we were just completely lied to and misled by the people who are supposed to protect our best interests, which are the administrators at these elite colleges. And the only part I'll finish up from your question before is health science students. They're a completely different category, and it's very frustrating, right? Because what's happening is I keep telling parents, just assume that if your student is a health science major, at some point they will be mandated to take COVID-19 vaccine. So it can come from the college, it can come from the clinical facility or healthcare facility where they must complete internships, practicums, rotations, you name it, or it can come from both.
Yeah.
So if I had to tell you today, let's say medical schools, right? There's about 130, 160 medical schools in the United States. I would say maybe a quarter or less of those medical schools still mandate COVID-19 vaccines. Harvard doesn't, Yale doesn't, Rutgers doesn't, Johns Hopkins does, Emory does. Reimery, don't ask me to explain it. That I cannot do. Getting into the psychology of it, the justification of it. I've been trying to do that since 2020, and I cannot. 2021, early 2021, and I cannot explain it. But what's happening is, so let's say your student gets into Harvard Medical School. This is wonderful. They got 4 years of medical school. They have no COVID-19 vaccine. There's a very good chance that when they get to rotations of some sort and even residency, that those hospitals or clinical facilities are going to then have a mandate in place. And see, these are the emergencies I get from students saying, oh my God, I made it through 4 years of medical school. They are telling me the hospital won't accept my exemption or is now mandating me to take COVID-19 vaccines. What am I supposed to do? I just spent 4 years on medical tuition and I can't get placement in a facility. So they comply. So most of them comply. I mean, who's going to throw away that kind of investment? Some of them pivot, change professions. Some of them get out of health science altogether. But these are the students that today, 2025, are still grappling with COVID-19 vaccine mandates more than I think anybody realizes. I think it's pervasive amongst this healthy young adult population in the health science major category. And I think most of the world thinks COVID-19 vaccine mandates are over, and they're just not.
Well, and I want to expand that just a little bit. Anyone who has to go through clinicals, because I have a trial in 2 weeks right now about a firefighter who needed an EMT certificate.
Yes.
And he had to go through clinicals, and Cleveland Clinic was requiring the COVID-19 shot. So we do have a trial on this exact issue. Now, I do want to say Cleveland Clinic has actually been pretty good in terms of allowing exemptions and things like that. What happened is we got in a catch-22 with the city saying, it would not write an exemption because it didn't have a mandate. But Cleveland Clinic wanted an exemption written up, and the city wouldn't write up an exemption for this kid, even though they didn't, that's all they needed to do, a 2-sentence exemption, and he'd have been fine. But now we're going to trial, wasting everybody's time, and he's lost his salary for the last 2 years. So, it's anyone who has to go through any clinical, and that's a lot of people. They are going to potentially be faced with these kind of ridiculous mandates. 100%. I want to call out Cass Sunstein, and I may be pronouncing his last name wrong, but he's a law professor from Harvard. I think he taught at University of Chicago as well. And he's one of the people who really pushes nudge theory. And nudge theory is just, we're too dumb to figure it out. Right. So Cass Sunstein has no respect for the average American, the average student. He sits in an ivory tower pontificating and creating these nudge theories that, are being implemented right now in the University of California system.
Yep. 100%. And I would go insofar as to say, Warner, that Jerome Adams reached out to every elite leader in higher education, Harvard, Yale, the Ivies, you name it. And he created, there's something called the COVID Collaborative. And what Jerome Adams did is he wrote this letter to every leader in higher education, personally reaching out to several of them who are co-signatories on this letter. And the letter's dreadful. I mean, it basically says, do everything you can to get these kids to take COVID-19 vaccines. And use materials put out by the American College Health Association, which were all these propaganda materials that you can imagine what they said, things like, you took every other vaccine and you're fine. Take this vaccine, you'll be fine. It's 100%, literally, this was written in the documents. It's 100% safe and effective. It's been vetted. It's been tested. If you don't take this vaccine, you're going to go home and kill your grandma. You're going to lose friends on campus. This was written in black and white for college administrators, college influencers to use to get their students and to get their peers to uptake COVID-19 vaccines at that time. Because right after the COVID Collaborative letter and Jerome Adams reached out to all these leaders, it's tribal, right? It is tribal. At this point, we're all in on it. Nobody gave a shit about looking at the science, looking at the data. It came from Jerome Adams. They all got on board, and there was no way that they were getting off that propaganda train. They're still not getting off that propaganda train.
Yeah. So, right? And one of the things that one of the things that we saw and that you're pointing out that people don't realize, and frankly, I didn't realize, is how centrally coordinated all of this was.
Yes.
And in Ohio, we had a group called the Inter-University Council based at Ohio State University, but that actually sent out recommendations to all the state schools.
Yep.
And, to your point about what he said in the letter, you're going to lose your friends or whatever. I just want to call out a couple of names of some of the students who are so brave here in Ohio.
Yeah.
Benjamin Lip at University of Cincinnati, Tice Pat, who went on to work for VSRF for a while. I think he's working in the Senate right now.
Wow.
And Jack Noble. They went after Jack and Tice were at Ohio University, and Benjamin was at University of Cincinnati. And these young men were brave enough to stand up against the entire onslaught of this, and did a remarkable job exposing the Inter-University Council through public records requests, setting up websites. And I will tell you, by the end of the process, because they were all at these universities, by the end of the process, their relationships had healed. The other students had really, it had broken through to the students. I know Tice personally told me this, that, initially he was just kind of, isolated by his position. That ended by the end of this process as the students realized the fraud that was being perpetrated upon them by the administrations and by the Inter-University Council. And I just, one quick aside, the Inter-University Council, we got a bunch of their emails, right, through public records request. And they actually called themselves in the email, jokingly, but to me, not so much, the cabal, CABAL.
Whoa.
They self-identify as the cabal.
Oh, that's insane. I had a very close relationship with Tice. We worked very closely together early on, because I agree with you. He was so outspoken and so brave, and just listened to his inner voice and pursued truth. And I remember in some of those FOIA requests that he got, there were also administrator exchanges saying, the kids were on spring break around the time that that they announced COVID-19 vaccines. And then of course, summer break came, and compliance wasn't mandated until, fall, August, September 2021. And the administrators were going back and forth saying, we need to get the kids back on campus. We need to get them away from their parents, where we can talk them into making the best decisions for themselves. Get them out of home, get them back to school, open up, and we will get a high vaccination rate.
And that really brings something up. I mean, these behaviors, if you think about sex trafficking, right? What we have here and had here is something that Christine Dolan has termed medical trafficking. And I like that term. And the analogies actually, if you look at it and start thinking about it, the analogies are really rampant. The same kind of stuff. It's a grooming process. It's get them away from their families, isolate them. All of that, all of that was taking place.
Absolutely. It's a great term. I love it. I'm going to steal it.
Yeah,
and
please do.
It's the truth. The themes are so common. They're just infiltrating all of these different aspects of society so they can get to everybody, break up the family decision-making unit and get the students alone where they're easy to control and manipulate. Hey, you want to go to the cafeteria? Take this vaccine. I mean, that's what they were doing at Boston College. You want to go to the football game? You're going to show up with a big scarlet letter attached to your student ID when you scan in to go to a football game if you don't take these vaccines. Same with the dining hall. I mean, these kids were carted off in police vehicles, isolated for 2 weeks without even the ability to go outside. The stories would make your head spin, and everybody went along with it. Just mind-blowing stuff.
Well, thank God some of these students did not. And as you know, we sued 5 of Ohio State universities over this issue. And, I think that the lawsuits were salutary for the system. All of them ended up backing down and granting exemptions. And we had some really good wins in that process as well. And then you know this too, the effort to write exemptions, communicate with schools about exemptions. I mean, that was literally thousands and thousands of people. The phone wouldn't stop ringing.
Would not stop ringing. That was our big, we when I set up this organization, we made so many mistakes setting it up. I've never been an advocate who has been in such high demand early on. And that's what we were doing, Warner. We were getting thousands of requests a day for exemptions, and we were just trying to save lives. If these kids wanted to get out, that was our primary goal. So in the beginning, we were running around with our hair on fire, just trying to save kids.
Yeah. Well, part of the reason we set up Freedom Council was to have attorneys who were able to respond and help out with this. How many attorneys worked with you, Lucia?
Oh, geez. I would say we had probably up to 30, 40 attorneys at different times, different attorneys in different states, right? Some of these attorneys have been working for a while, getting exemptions to other vaccines in their states. When we figured out who those attorneys were, like Jim Marmingus and Kevin Berry, that was super helpful for us because we could send, New York State right to those guys. Kevin Berry now does multiple different states. Christina Hildebrand at A Voice for Choice Advocacy. She's one of our close allies. She's been doing this for decades. And so she was ready to hit the ground running when all of this came out. And she's always been very strong in the exemption department. And then, different organizations came forward and said, look, can you refer us your exemptions? And here's what we do. And, there's a group that secures federal exemptions. So they've had a tremendous amount of success. And then there's just one-off advocates that are sort of religious ministers or, just really have a great handle on the religious exemption perspective. And they've secured thousands of exemptions. They're still winning. Christina just won an exemption for a clinical trial student, a clinical rotation student, a nursing student, who we were afraid. We thought, you're going to have to leave the state. And, not all these students have the means to leave the state, to go to another state, to, and even get their credits accepted or get a different facility or, whatever the case may be. So she was a superstar in securing that last exemption for this nursing student, which was a really tough one. It's why we sent it to her. There have been people all over the US. I mean, there's a German student group that I'm in touch with, and they sort of mimic the work that we're doing, creating lists and creating exemptions in Germany. There's a Canadian student group that we've worked with, and they've also mimicked our lists, but for Canada, and have mimicked some of our exemption documents. And, so we've been sort of putting out, we share our stuff freely. We don't really fundraise. I mean, you can donate to us through Give, Send, Go and our Substack. We refer all of our donation requests to Freedom Council. Everything that we do is free. It's a free public service. I mean, that's how I often describe No College Mandates as a free public service to help you make better educated choices for your higher education.
I didn't realize you had expanded into Europe. It's funny because I was just mapping out our membership, and we have Germany is one of our areas where we have freedom counselors, and then
nice.
We have some in Africa, a bunch in Australia, Canada. So we're becoming more international as well. I'd like to talk to you later about that.
Okay.
I want to point out that Russ Barger was on with his clients a few weeks ago on brokentruth.tv.
Oh, great.
And he had a horrific story of a young lady whose medical education was interrupted over mandates.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that, John, a little bit?
Yeah, I got to pull her name up.
Sorry.
I didn't know we were going to be tested on this.
That's right.
Hey, in the meantime,
Russ has been a fighter in Nebraska. He's one of the Russ Barger. He's been fantastic out in Nebraska on this stuff, and he had a real win with her and with what she went through.
Awesome.
But I mean, these are life-changing situations for these students. They're just not expecting what they have to go through here.
That's
and while
right.
John's looking that up, let me move on to one other area. I am disappointed in the military. We currently have some nurses that we're working with in the military that are objecting to the flu shot, which we now know is actually causing negative efficacy.
Yep.
The Cleveland Clinic has a study on the flu shot. It damages your immune system and makes you more likely to become ill with the flu. And, yet we still have issues like this in the military. And the flu shot is an issue with all of the medical students and all of the hospitals.
Yeah, it is.
Well,
Yeah.
and how they are trying to mandate what now is proven to be ineffective and completely inappropriate to fight the flu.
Yep.
I just don't understand that.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the second biggest request I get is, now that COVID-19 vaccine mandates are almost done, can you turn to flu? Because it's extremely onerous. It's yearly updated flu shots in healthcare. And it became much more strict after COVID-19. the medical schools, the nursing schools. I don't recall that there were flu mandates at the hospitals. I believe there were, but I don't believe at the health science schools. And now I think they're largely flu is you have to take it at almost every single school, I believe.
Well, and they've gone into this inquisitorial thing with the flu shot as well. So previously, I mean, I've got some clients that have had flu exemptions for decades, and where it was just fill out a little paper, you get your exemption. Yeah. And now, it's this inquisitorial thing as to your religious beliefs or your medical issue, and this is all a huge invasion of privacy for these people.
Yeah. Yeah,
and it's literally offensive.
It is, truly.
Who do you think was probably the most brazen in their mandates and just refusal to even acknowledge your petition?
You mean what college?
Which colleges were the worst? Yeah.
It's easy, actually. I would say that Rutgers, as you could imagine, Rutgers is hook, line, and sinker, wholly owned by big pharmaceutical companies. You can go to today, you can go to Rutgers' website and you can find pharmaceutical fellowships that are fully funded by Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson. So these fellowships that students can get 100% paid for, fully funded by the big pharmaceutical companies. And if you track those students as to where they go once they graduate, well, guess where they go? 90% of them are fast tracking into big pharmaceutical companies in New Jersey. It's literally right there in black and white on their websites. Nobody hides it. It's there for everybody to see. So you've got Rutgers University that's trialing Pfizer and J&J vaccines. And so they're inviting people to come on campus and participate in these clinical trials. And so they can take their data, right? And they're saying, oh, by the way, we will give you informed consent because this is a choice, right? You have a choice to participate in this clinical trial or not. So here's all the side effects you might experience. Then you've got them mandating the students, every single student. I mean, they kicked out tens, 20s, 30s students who refused to take these vaccines. At the height of the announcement, April 2021, I would say there were anywhere from 20 to 50 Rutgers students that were kicked to the curb because they refused to take the vaccines. There was no exemption available. You comply or you leave. And that's basically what Rutgers communicated. They said it on national TV. They said it in written articles. And so then you've got Rutgers, right, who mandated this thing for every single community member on campus. No exemptions whatsoever. You mean to tell me they're not taking that data and using it for the development of these vaccines? Where is the line that kept optional participation and mandatory I would guess there was no line. I would be shocked if there was a line. They used that data. They came down so hard on their students to use that data in the development of vaccines, for which they financially, reap financial benefits. So by far, that was the worst college. They did it on purpose. They did it to set a tone. They did it to set an example. And then the Ivy Leagues were probably the next most strict. Made it very, very hard. I don't want to say exemptions were impossible. So my son, as you know, got into Dartmouth, and he went to Dartmouth September 2021. Well, when we requested an exemption, the exemption process for him, it was this big, scary email. You can apply. You probably won't get it. You're going to have to interview with several different departments. You're going to have to justify your religious beliefs or have your doctor explain your medical exemption. They made it sound so scary. Jack's was rubber stamped. I mean, boom. You want a religious exemption? Okay, no problem. The reason that was, I later found out, because I beat Dartmouth up pretty bad. Since my son was there, I went after them really hard because I had access to the administration. I had access to the doctors. I mean, they started ignoring me after a while, but I got a bunch of parents on my side. There were about 30 of us, and we all wrote letters, and this was my testing ground, because I figured if I could get Dartmouth to come to its senses, then everybody would follow Dartmouth. Well, that never happened, because they went on to mandate boosters, and the whole, kit and caboodle just kept going. It kept going as if it made sense, and it just didn't. So they rubber stamped Jack, and I found out that's because only 100 community members at Dartmouth even applied for an exemption. So we're talking teachers, faculty, staff, undergrad, graduate. We're talking tens of thousands of people. They had 100 that submitted. So they rubber stamped every single one. They left the door open to not approve exemptions, because if they got a flood of exemptions, they would have turned every single one of them down. But for Jack, it was a non-issue. So Jack got to go to Dartmouth. They all had to wear masks. They all had to test. I think Jack had to test twice a week, where the vaccinated kids only had to test once a week. And that went on maybe for about a semester. Jack had to quarantine for 2 weeks when he got COVID. I mean, the whole thing was such a joke. It was, the kids that were vaccinated got COVID just as bad, if not worse, than the kids that were. So Jack knew a handful of kids that were unvaccinated, but nobody talked about it. I mean, they still don't talk about it.
I mean, this is such a tragedy, and the amount of injury that I'm seeing from people who got the shot is just horrendous in the general public. And I guess I'm wondering specifically for the students, did you see injuries popping up at Dartmouth?
Every single college. I mean, Dartmouth in 2021 and 2022, and even into 2023, had anywhere from 4 to 5 sudden unexpected deaths.
Oh,
where
geez.
This was non-existent in the community. Suicides, I think 2021 they had 4 suicides. Dartmouth before that maybe had 4 suicides over a 5-7 year period. 2021 they had 4, and then heart attacks, sudden and unexpected deaths, turbo cancers. All of these things were written up in the school newspaper. Nobody ever followed up with what was the reason, what happened, how did it happen? Shouldn't we ask more questions? It was just, wow, it's so unfortunate, such bad luck. Nobody put it together. And if you look at many of these college campuses, you'll see the same pattern. I think Worcester Polytech Institute in Worcester, Massachusetts had something like 7 or 8 suicides in 1 year. They in the previous 15 years had never had that many suicides. But in the year that they locked the kids down and kept them out of school, they were having a suicide almost every month or every other month. It was just the fallout, the consequences of what went on. I don't know if we will ever realize how severe and how deep the consequences ran.
Yeah, I spoke with a college employee, university employee, about a month ago, and it's funny when you talk to some of these folks. They ask you, "What do you do?" And I was like, "Well, all the doctors and attorneys that you see on TV fighting mandates. Well, they're my friends." And so I guess when I throw that out there, it sort of opens up a little more conversation and ease of conversation. So this guy just starts telling me about how, well, you know what, they did mandate on us. I was going to have to lose my job at my university if I didn't get this shot. He's like, I only got one. And I always wondered if when I got myocarditis later, it was connected to that. And I'm like, yeah.
Yep.
So the employees of these universities were as hoodwinked as anybody.
100%.
Have you had any, what university or school system would you say had more employees than average that would come to you and say, thank you for doing this?
Yeah.
We're awake now.
Believe it or not, there was an underground network at Rutgers, and they reached out to me. So there was one professor who I'm still in touch with. She's amazing. She's biology, and oh my God, they went after this woman so hard, and she's like, I need this job. This is my livelihood. I've put 15 years into my work. I cannot lose this job. And they put her through hell. I mean, absolute hell. And what happened was I connected her with another sort of underground network of professors. They were at different campuses. So she was she was they were at the Camden campus, and she was at another campus. So I ended up putting them together, and her and I have written some articles together about Rutgers. And they were trying to fight it from the inside. There were a couple, same with Columbia, there were a couple professors that got together and they were trying to fight it from underneath. I think Dr. Oz was actually part of that group of underground doctors. His son at the time, I think he took the primary series vaccines. He was a medical student, but he didn't want his son to take the booster. So he kind of went underground to get to the administration to say, look, do you really have to do this? Columbia went ahead and did it anyway. They mandated a booster anyway. So it just goes to show you that, you can have these conversations, you can have these little groups that get together, even on the inside. And it has very little effect on what the administrators do. In the height of all of this, it made very little difference. The administration was going to go with what they were told to do by the White House and by the powers that be in public health on a federal level, Dr. Fauci and Jerome Adams. And, these people got together and they put a huge hard sell on colleges, because when you think about it, so shortly after Jerome Adams' letter to leaders in higher education under the COVID Collaborative Initiative, they started the White House College COVID-19 Vaccine Challenge. Well, what do you think that was all about? Same thing. They put out all these propaganda pieces. They asked all these colleges to participate in the challenge to get 100% vaccination rates on college campuses. That's because it's over 20 million young, vulnerable, easy to manipulate students on these campuses. That's 20 million yeses right there. That's easy. That's a slam dunk. So that is the other reason I took on this fight. People always say, why didn't you just take on the fight to end all COVID-19 vaccine mandates? Well, I chose to specialize because, first of all, I had 2 college students. Second of all, nobody realized just how oppressive these mandates were at the college level for the reasons I just explained. The heavy pressure coming from the federal agencies and from the White House was like no other cohort experienced like college students did.
I remember going to write an exemption as a minister for a UC Santa Barbara student. And I was so curious about the mandate that was coming out of UC Board of Regents that I started investigating them, trying to find, how do you contact them? How do you email them? They had wiped it all off the internet. They didn't want to be contacted. No. It was almost like, I thought, I was like, have they been kidnapped? And now they're just poster boards on a website that you can't actually contact.
No.
But it was amazing to me, the people that were on the board, and they were unreachable. It was concerning. How would you even do service of process for something like that?
Yep.
Did you find that universities like, I don't know, Morehouse or Spelman were more resistant to the vaccines due to, I don't know, like the Tuskegee experiments being kind of nearby in Alabama?
The exact opposite, John. The exact opposite. The HBCUs were brutal. So up until, maybe about a year ago or a little less, we were down to 15 colleges that were still, this was the last of it until Donald Trump put out his executive order that said, if you still mandate COVID-19 vaccines, you're going to lose federal funding. And then that was the end of it. But before that, I was still fighting 15 colleges. 3 or 4 of those were HBCUs. They were brutal, absolutely brutal, almost as bad, if not worse, than the Ivy Leagues. So after the Ivy Leagues and the elite colleges all dropped their mandates, these HBCUs were still holding on. And I kept thinking to myself, there's got to be a revenue stream going to some of these HBCUs. See, but here again, it wasn't universal. It wasn't every HBCU. Some of them were just completely disorganized. You'd call and they'd be like, what are you talking about? We don't have a COVID-19 vaccine mandate. And I'm like, well, it's listed on your website. Students still think you have a mandate. And like, oh yeah, well, you got to call the IT department to change that. I'm like, no, I don't have to call anybody. You need to take it down because you're misleading students. And I'm going to report it to the Trump administration and you're going to lose federal funding. So fix this, and then eventually I think they all got fixed. There might even be some believe it or not, that still have it listed, but there really is no mandate because the administration was just so incredibly disorganized. No, they were dreadful, John. I mean,
Wow.
it literally is mind blowing.
We had the opportunity to depose Arthur Reingold, who served on the University of California committee on this. And he claims he's an epidemiologist, but I think he has a BA in biology or BS in biology and an MD. And, I confronted him with, the facts that we've now learned. He's completely ignorant of DNA integration and that entire issue. And in fact, he's had all his boosters. I asked him about his vaccination status. And I said, well, and he has grandkids and he's having his family boosted. So I think, I really expected there'd be a little bit of wiggle room and maybe a little bit of an opening, among somebody who's in that kind of position. And honestly, I asked him as well. I said, well, who did you meet with on that committee? Because I knew John was having some problems identifying him. And he met with them every single week for 10 months. Okay.
Okay.
He couldn't answer who was on the committee. And I asked him if he had an organic problem, with his memory that would explain his lack of information about who else was on the committee. He said he didn't, he wasn't senile, but he couldn't remember them in the moment. Every week for 10 months. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I was astounded. Here's a guy in the UC system, MD from University of Chicago, and just ignorant of the medicine, ignorant of the epidemiology.
That's the thing. How can you be an epidemiologist and not know about DNA integration? Yeah. You've got Kevin McKiernan and Jessica Rose doing groundbreaking work on DNA integration. How do you call yourself an epidemiologist? By selectively looking at data. And that is where we've been since day one, right? Right, Warner and John?
Yeah.
I mean, we've got people that call themselves doctors that refuse to look at the data because they're afraid of what it's going to show.
I think most of them, rather than even listening or trying to rationally review the topic, they just run to Twitter and gaslight everybody. And it may be because of some sort of cognitive bias on their end that they just can't process what they've done to themselves or families and everybody they know. But then also could be they're hiding the cookie jar.
Well, I mean, here's this guy who sits and he served on major national committees. He served with the FDA. He was president of the Society for Epidemiologic Research and the American Epidemiological Society, editorial boards of American Journal of Epidemiology, Global Public Health, all that stuff. Yep. And yet he hasn't really studied epidemiology. He got pulled in and slotted into these positions. And I think it's just this go along, get along mentality. And he rose to the top. And then, you start questioning them and they know nothing. Nothing.
It still shocks me to this day. You think I'd be used to it by now. I have a friend that's a nurse, a retired nurse, and she would admit to she didn't work. She wasn't a nurse over COVID, and she's like, look, we do our best as healthcare workers, and we make mistakes all the time. And she said the hardest thing in any healthcare setting for any healthcare provider is to admit they made a mistake. So what we do is we glaze over the mistakes. We don't make them again where give somebody the wrong drug or the wrong milligrams of something or whatever. And she's like, but nobody admits they're wrong. As a matter of fact, we're kind of trained that way. You can't put it in the chart. Oh yeah, be careful, with the milligrams, if you gave 10 milligrams before, but you really were supposed to give the 5 milligram dose, you just note a lower dose. You don't know, going forward, 10 milligrams is too much. You don't note any of that. Right. So I don't know if it explains anything, but there's a strong institutional bias, as John said, that I think is enveloped somewhere in their training, and when they're taught in school, these are, these are the rules. This is how you practice, and don't you dare deviate. From the rules of the hospital, the orders of the hospital, the order of your supervisors. Don't even think critically. Even if you see a mistake, you find a mistake, you're certain there's a mistake. And when these healthcare providers do finally notice that something's awry, that's when they leave the system. So it's like you've got this small percentage that leaves the system because they can no longer condone the system. But everybody else, they've been trained for decades to just go along with the system. I don't know how you break that.
I mean, they're trained to dissociate.
That's right.
That's the number one thing I think that doctors are trained. They're not trained in medical history or the history of medications.
No.
And how can they even know all the medications that are out there at this point? There's a new one every 5 seconds.
Yep.
So how are you going to maintain knowledge of the potential risk of polypharmacy, where you overprescribe too many different drugs that cause unknown consequences in the body? So I thought all this was done by nurses and doctors. It's not anymore. There's no way they can keep up.
No.
And they're now dissociative. So we've almost trained them we forced them into narcissism.
That's right.
So they get rid of their empathy. So that means they're going to shut off the part of their mind and their soul that wakes them up when there's a problem that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
And then they just continue down this path. It's very frustrating. Good for you for coming out here and doing this. And who knows how many kids' lives you've saved just by being a bulwark to this tyrannical administrative state.
Yeah, that was the goal, and our proudest accomplishment is the lists that we have up on our website. I can't even tell you, I mean, if I had a nickel for everybody that said, you got to monetize those lists, and I said, I would die. I would sooner die. I created those lists to help every single person get to the place that best meets their ethical standards. And they will always be free, and they will always be there as a historical marker of what these colleges did. And I would be damned if I ever put a price tag on them, because what happened to society, what happened to these kids, it was that abominable. And I think, to your point, John, the healthcare profession has elevated monetary incentives over empathy. And we have got to reverse that if we want to stop this crazy train that we're on and get our medical freedoms back.
Right. And in order to do that, we've got to fix the medical schools. If we want to do that, we've got to get the financial incentives out of the medical schools to essentially be, servants to pharmaceutical and big medicine. Then we've got to entwine the medical billing companies, the financial part of it. We've got to fix, Obamacare. I mean, let's start with at least stop trying to shove the needles in the kids' arms. That's the first step.
Well, I mean, I think the other thing is, the architecture that's in place right now in the entire medical system has these financial incentives that have got this train running, and we literally have to change the architecture. I thought, how can all of these people be in this narcissistic behavior where they won't admit they were at fault, right? In any way. And, so something has to be reconstructed so that fault can be accepted, discussed. It is science. And I remember too, in the older days, doctors actually were kind of scientists, differential diagnosis, their testing, each patient was an issue that they had to confront and deal with and think about.
Yep.
And we're moving to an algorithmic AI thing that completely gets that scientific process out of the doctor's head, the critical thinking that you were talking about. I mean, all of that seems to be going by the wayside. So, we really have to build a new architecture for all of our institutions at this point, I think, but certainly in the medical field.
I was, from what I've been told, probably the number one issue in terms of getting medical doctors to be scientists and enthusiastic scientists and researchers again is to eliminate the unbearable paperwork that they have to do with EMRs.
Oh, well, that
which was
too.
another Obamacare thing.
Well, and that's exactly right. That
Heaven
part-
forbid you diagnose somebody with something that's going to require you to spend the next 45 minutes writing down. By the way, you only get paid for 15 minutes of that
Right.
visit.
That's right.
So,
Well, and that's exactly right. The electronic medical record has been a complete disaster, and it allowed for the centralized control during this crisis, and it's allowed for all these hospital protocols to be imposed, and it's limited even the medications that are in the formularies for doctors to even consider. So that piece of this needs to be changed dramatically.
it allowed doctors and hospitals to target anti-vaxxer patients.
Yeah, right.
Because they would put it in the notes.
Yeah.
Epic everywhere.
Yeah.
So before we wrap this up, what's next?
For me?
Mhm.
Well, I'm not done. I had hoped to retire by now.
You better
I'd
not
hoped-
be.
What's that?
You better not be.
No, not done. I had hoped to retire. I thought, all right, college, I met my goal, which is to end college COVID-19 vaccine mandates. And then parents and students are like, oh no, you're not done. We're still students and we're in health science, so this is not done. So I am in touch with the Kennedy administration. He knows, right? He knows these things are there. His hands are still somewhat tied because trying to solve this, I talked to Warner recently about this, John. It's not easy, right? It's not so how our health science, let's break it down just a little bit, but it's way more complicated than even what I'm going to explain is, so you've got Johns Hopkins Medical School that still mandate COVID-19 vaccines, but not for any other major, just medical school and nursing, I believe. So why are they not being defunded? This is a school, right? This is part of Johns Hopkins. Well, historically, health science programs have been able to get exceptional treatment. What does that mean? It means that they can deviate in their health policies because they interface with patients in clinical settings. All right. So Johns Hopkins Medical School nursing programs not getting defunded, yet they still have COVID-19 vaccine mandates in place. Well, I think Kennedy and Trump can say, look, you're a school. You do get federal funding, even if it's just through student federal loan programs. You do get federal funding. We are going to defund you and the mandate. Well, then we don't know. So then those medical students, as we discussed, have to go on to clinical settings for practicums. All right. Well, how do we end that mandate? This is now a hospital setting. The student has graduated. So after 4 years of medical school, the student is a doctor. But in order to practice, they have to go and do residencies. And those residencies quite often still mandate the COVID-19 vaccine. So now the student's still not safe. Let's say, Johns Hopkins Medical School, we've jumped that hurdle, we've defeated that. Well, they get to a hospital setting, there's still a COVID-19 vaccine mandate in place. They can't be a practicing doctor without those practicums. I mean, I think they can technically, but I think it's really hard to get hired without residency into a practice or into a hospital or into a program. So how do we end that? That's now at the hospital level. That's now at the clinical setting level, right? This is where it just gets so incredibly complicated. So then does the Trump administration on a federal level have to defund those hospitals? Well, how is that going to happen under CMS? Well, so Dr. Oz knows about our work. Dr. Bhattacharya is a good friend, knows about our work. I know they're out there thinking about this problem. Short of removing these things from the market, it's really complicated to just go out there and defund based on COVID-19 vaccine mandates. Then you've got state public health, right? And that's a whole separate issue because states like Pennsylvania, they never tracked federal CMS certified facility mandates. So when Biden said CMS certified facilities have to mandate COVID-19 vaccines, and then a year later he took the mandate away, hospitals in the state of Philadelphia, any state in the United States, if they want to build this into state public health law, can say, well, we don't care what you tell us that CMS certified facilities have to do. We think that protect the citizens of our state, we still have to mandate COVID-19 vaccines in hospital settings. And usually when they do that, they don't discriminate. So if they're mandating COVID-19 vaccines It's for healthcare workers and students. It's for everybody that enters that hospital setting as a volunteer, intern, employee, whatever. So it's incredibly complicated. So aside from being in touch with the Kennedy administration and still saying, look, at the very least, we can defund these medical schools that are mandating these things. I'm working on a bill with Representative Mark Messmer of Indiana. And this bill, basically, he put it out last year, and it said, it codifies the executive order, Trump's executive order, which said, we're going to defund colleges that still mandate COVID-19 vaccines. I reached out to Messmer's staffers and said, look, that's not good enough, because you're not capturing the medical schools and the health science programs that are still mandating, because they consider themselves to be exceptional programs. Exceptional treatment applies because of this client interface thing that they've got going on with their students. And so Messmer's office, they've been great. His staffers are great. They took every one of my suggested amendments to the bill. And as far as I know, I haven't had communication with them in the last couple of weeks. They've amended the bill to say, we're going to defund all programs, all learning programs, and including learning programs at hospitals. So if learning programs are set up at hospital, now whether this works or not, in theory, I don't know. I put it into the bill with the hopes that once it gets to Congress floor or whatever, hopefully we continue to mature the bill and make it actually work. So it's not just colleges, it's not just health science programs at colleges, but it's teaching programs at hospitals, right? So defund those parts of the programs. Maybe not the whole hospital, maybe not the employees and the staff and the faculty, but maybe some way we can defund the teaching part of that hospital, because the students need those practicums as part of their degree. Whether it works or not, I don't know, but that's where we are right now.
Well, I'd like to point out that they threatened to defund if they didn't have these mandates in the medical centers, and they got everybody in line and to go along. So I have no hesitancy with reversing that.
Okay.
Reversing that at a national level. And I think Kennedy should do that.
Yep.
I am fascinated. I'm not sure I've seen this legislation, Lucia.
Okay.
If you would email that to me, I'd appreciate it. And have you written about it on your blog?
Yeah, it's on, I've written about it on our Substack, because what I've asked people to do, and Messmer's office has gotten pretty good response. That's why they gave attention to my suggested amendments, because what I asked my followers to do is print out my letter, write your own letter if you want, send it to Messmer's office, and let's bombard this guy with letters saying, look, this is an important issue. So I still have parents that are printing out that letter. So I'll send you the Substack post, and then I'll send you the letter, because I created the letter, and then I had 25 of our doctor friends, everybody that McCullough, Nass, all the lovely, wonderful people, all signed on board. And then Dr. Nass, who's amazing, she's my she's sort of my pathway to Kennedy. She speaks right to Bobby, and she's like, look, this is hugely important to me. You've been beating this drum for the past 3-4 years. We have got to end this at the very least. They're the only ones still being oppressively mandated to take these things, many without exemptions easily accepted. And so she's been a great fan of my work, and she's been a huge help. So she's my mouthpiece to Bobby, and then I work directly with Messmer. So I'll send you that in an email.
I know we got to wrap up, John, but I think what Lucia is saying is really important. I kind of want to put an exclamation mark on this. And it's not just, Indiana. It's every state needs to be confronted with the need to protect our health sciences and medical school kids. Because, let's cycle right back around. They're being horrifically injured.
Yep.
Through what's happening to them. And it's not just the COVID shot, it's the flu shot, it's the meningitis shot, it's others. We need we need these medical students and health sciences students and others like firefighters who need to do clinicals.
Yep. To
be able to opt out individually from this stuff. If you are a student who really believes in the vaccines and wants to get it, please, more power to you. We're not going to stop that.
100%.
But if you don't believe in it, you should still be able to go into medicine And
Yep.
I've seen in the courts what's happened. I mean, the judges think, oh, these poor patients are going to get exposed to these kids.
Yeah.
And that's just ridiculous. We've done multiple depositions where we've asked infectious disease experts for the hospitals, can you name one person they infected? They can never name any infection from staff to staff, staff to patient, patient to staff. There's nothing. There's just nothing. And I, so we have that on the record. If you need that for anything, I'd be happy to come testify in Indiana. It's only 4 hours away from me here. So
exactly.
Thank you. Get some Freedom Council presidents out there, but I encourage everyone who's listening, please look at your state, the architecture of your politics, and let's change that architecture there too, to make sure that our states are standing strong, protecting all students, but in particular, we are throwing these medical school students and people who need to do clinicals under the bus right now and causing all kinds of injuries. So let's fix it.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Thank you.
One little piece of homework just to show everybody. If you want to hear more about the interview that Warner referred to with
thank you. Oh my gosh.
And Russ Barger.
Oh, awesome.
This is the thing. The link is in the text thread below in the chat, and you can find it at brokentruth.tv.
Awesome.
And is there anything else anyone would like to add?
We had 2 students on that. That's the Creighton case in Nebraska.
Yeah, I have not been updated on that, so I'm going to go watch that.
Yeah,
I'm happy he got good outcome.
Yeah, Lauren Borchik and Patrice Quadrell. I believe that's how you pronounce their names. I'm sorry if I got it wrong, you guys, but what remarkable people to stand up and fight.
Yeah,
like all these students have been. So.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you both for another excellent episode of Broken Truth. I'm John Davidson. This has been Warner Mendenhall and the wonderful guest Lucia Sinatra from No College Mandates, and we will see you next week.
Thank you so much, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This may be the most profound scandal in human history.
This was the answer. This would have halted the pandemic.
I have lost trust in humanity, in my government, in my agencies. Trust is very hard to get back.
Something is going very wrong in this world.
The pharmacists were denying the treatment, which to me is outrageous.
Our generation let this happen. We don't know what to do.